Alright, welcome back to the second presidential guide that I'm recording, this time on James Madison's presidency. So let's jump right on into it. James Madison, he is following up Thomas Jefferson. He is Jefferson's Secretary of State in what will start to become a trend on two fronts. One is that a Secretary of State, a former Secretary of State, becoming president. Thomas Jefferson was kind of the leading edge of that trend. Madison is going to kind of be the first one that kind of proves that trend. He was Jefferson's Secretary of State, and really he gained a lot of knowledge of diplomacy during Jefferson's administration. So we'll take a look at how that kind of impacts his administration and further administrations when other Secretary of States get into that role. He's also a product of another trend that we're going to see. This is President number 4, and let me get the fingers in there, and he is going to be the 3rd Virginian. So we have this thing at the beginning of the presidency is the Virginia dynasty. He is number 3 in that Virginia dynasty, behind Washington and Jefferson. So let's take a look at him. Let's go back into Madison a bit before he becomes president. We've already talked about him as Secretary of State. We've seen him before. He's been at the Constitutional Convention. After the Constitutional Convention, he is going to be a strong Federalist, writing the part of the Federalist Papers, really advocating for a new form of government that's going to be more rigid in its frame and more effective as far as federal power. However, he's also going to bring in the ideas of the later Democrat Republicans, at the time the Anti-Federalists, was supporting the Bill of Rights. He's going to be one of those that kind of concocts the deal to get the Constitution ratified. Add the Bill of Rights onto it. We'll do that after we sign this thing, though, after we get this thing ratified and working. Right? We can't amend the Constitution before it goes into effect. So we'll ratify it, then we'll amend it as soon as we can. And that's what happens. So Madison's seen as the father of the Constitution, so he's well known by all Americans. Again, the Secretary of State. Alright, so let's take a look at him. His vice presidents, he's also going to have 2. He's going to have a vice president in his first term, George Clinton, which is going to be about 3 years, and then George Clinton, I'm trying to remember why he doesn't serve out his full term, and actually he's going to be there in the beginning of the next term. I want to say he might have passed away. However, Elbridge Gerry is going to be the next vice president, and he'll only serve a year. And then James Madison, and this is something that not a lot of people kind of think about. You can be president without a vice president. You don't have to replace your vice president. And from 1814 until 1817, James Madison is going to be without a vice president. So even though there's 2 guys up there, for about 3 years at the time, he's going to be without a vice president to kind of be there. Now again, remember, vice president during this time period does hardly anything except for break those ties in the Senate, which is actually more of a possibility during that time. Other than that, not really seen as a key player. Alright. So America at the time that Madison takes over, we're still in these economic doldrums from the Embargo Act and the Non-Intercourse Act, where we're trying to force this peaceful coercion, trying to get Britain to stop impressing our sailors. And we're also having this native insurgency, kind of a ramping up of the fighting in the Northwest Territory with Tecumseh's Western Confederacy. We believe that the British are antagonizing them or prodding them to attack us. So we've got to deal with that issue as well. So all these things are on the plate when James Madison becomes president. All right, so the election of 1808, Madison is going to win fairly easily. The electoral vote eventually is 122 to 47, and that's mainly because Jefferson's popularity, even though it has dipped because of the Embargo Act, is still relatively high. The Federalist Party is more and more becoming a regional party without an influence in the West. They're losing any kind of influence on these new states that are coming into the Union that are going to become states. Now, having mentioned those new states further to the west, I had to go back and put these in there. I know I did it for Jefferson, so I'll do it for Madison too. There's going to be 2 new states during Madison's administration, one at the very tail end with Indiana. It is basically, Indiana is so late in the game that there's going to be some controversy in the next presidential election about whether its electors counted. But we are starting to see that westward progression, and with the Federalists losing now influence there, they're starting to become more of a regional party rather than a national party. And that's definitely the case in 1808. A little less in 1812 because the main campaign issue in the 1812 election is this War of 1812 that Madison has already kind of pushed Congress to vote on. They've bandied about a little bit with the War of 1812, but they're really looking to this presidential election as being making the decision for them. Essentially, does the country want to really go to war against Great Britain because of impressment issues and the fighting in the West with the natives? So the election of 1812 is much closer when he's taking on DeWitt Clinton. As far as his domestic policy, when he is president, he's going to do the same thing that Jefferson has done. He's going to focus on cutting back the federal government. If you remember, Jefferson is replacing a lot of people in the federal government, cutting jobs, making it a sleeker, faster is how they're going to portray it. He's going to really go after Hamilton's economic plan as well, especially that national bank. If you remember, the national bank is kind of the centerpiece of Hamilton's economic plan. It has now kind of died. It's getting to where it's dying out. It's got to be rechartered. He's going to veto the rechartering of the national bank in 1811, essentially killing it off. However, the War of 1812 proves something to James Madison. He's going to have a lot of problems funding the army without a national bank. So when it comes up again in 1816, Madison will then he'll sign it. He'll approve of the national bank in 1816. And really it's the War of 1812 that gets it into his mind that maybe the national bank does serve a purpose. But early on, he is Jeffersonian in his views to try to do away with it if he can. His policy towards the natives during this time period is very paternalistic. Now remember, during the War of 1812, it is a war. He is sending armies out there to crush Tecumseh and the Western Confederacy. But afterwards, and early on before the War of 1812, he's very paternalistic, a father figure, wanting to encourage civilization, cultivation of the fields, to get the natives to settle down and kind of integrate into American culture. The Tariff of 1816 is going to be passed during Madison's administration, right at the end, but it's still Madison's administration. So this is where Madison is, he is a Democrat-Republican, but he does kind of see an expanding scope for the federal government as well. The Tariff of 1816, it is the first protective tariff that the United States will have. If you can remember back Hamilton's tariff, it was all a cash grab. It was all about the federal government getting some money from these imports. This one is protective, meant to protect American manufacturers while they're just trying. They're kind of weak. They're kind of like baby giraffes, and unsteady and wobbly. They're just learning how to get this manufacturing thing going. So the Tariff of 1816 is going to protect them. And he's going to oppose the use of federal funds to build infrastructure. One of his last acts of the presidency before he leaves office is to veto a bill that would provide funds for new infrastructure projects like canals and roads. Excuse me. Like many people from the South during this time, he is a states' writer in that way. He believes that that is the scope of the state government and the federal government. That is not their place to build roads. They're not in the road building business. That's better left up to the states and private companies. Later, that gets very much replaced really quickly. And we had already kind of cracked as well, because Congress had passed the National Road in 1811, which is something we probably need to put in here as well. I'm trying to remember. If I'm remembering correctly, the National Road is 1811. So that is during Madison's administration. Even though he personally is going to oppose that as well. National 1811, National Road 1811. Alright, getting into the foreign policy, the big thing in Madison's administration, bar none, is going to be the War of 1812. From the get-go, he's got this animosity with Britain from the impressments. We've got the Non-Intercourse Act. We've trying to get them to respect our rights on the open ocean. They are not having any of it. They are not responding to it. It's like they don't even know we exist. They're influencing the natives in the Old Northwest to attack us, so we are going to eventually declare war in 1812, the War of 1812. We've already kind of covered the War of 1812, so we're not going to go back into it. We're not going to rehash it, but the invasion of Canada fails. We tried 3 times during the War of 1812 to invade Canada. Didn't work any of those times. Even though we burned Toronto, they burned DC back. But we are going to have major victories, the Great Lakes, Baltimore, and New Orleans. Again, this isn't the time to go into all the battles of the War of 1812. The big thing is that the war technically is going to end in a tie at the treaty again, but we're going to take that moral victory that we stood up to Britain, protected our rights to the freedom of the trade. And thinking of it in political history, since we're talking about a president here, a tie with that moral victory is just as good as an outright victory. It gives the Democrat-Republicans something strong to run on. And if we also remember, on top of this, the Hartford Convention is going to kill the Federalist Party. And I guess we could put the Hartford Convention in domestic policy, but it's not really Madison's doing. It's more of the America at the time. That the Hartford Convention occurs, and that's going to kill Federalist hopes going into the election of 1816. Their power starts to decrease so quickly after that. All right, and next time we'll see James Monroe take the helm.